I hope you had a great worship yesterday. Let's continue our journey in Book of Timothy. And again, let's look at in terms of growth and maturity. First Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 through 2. I urge you then, first of all, that petition, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and those in authority. A little boy once said to his mother, "Why does God let it be so dark?" Smiling, she answered, "Because he wants us to shine." Paul's words to Timothy carry that same challenge. He writes to a young leader who easily could have complained about the chaos and corruption around him. Political leaders misusing power, false teachers teaching lies, and believers facing hardship. A culture moving away from the truth. But Paul doesn't tell him to protest, resent the darkness. He says, pray. Pray for everyone, including the people in charge. Why? Because responsibility begins with taking ownership of what's within our reach, our attitude, our choices, our influence. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. Growth isn't about controlling everything around us. It's about leading ourselves faithfully within what God has entrusted to us. The journey from blame to ownership, when things around us aren't right, it's easy to look outward. We say, if only my boss changed, if only my family understood, if only the politicians will do better. But growth happens when we move from reacting to responding. Spiritual growth involves learning that God rarely changes our situation before he changes us from inside out. Growth deepens when we stop blaming and begin asking, what does it look like for me to bring light in this situation? Taking responsibility doesn't mean taking control. It means taking initiative. It means choosing prayer instead of complaining, service instead of withdrawing, gratitude instead of criticism. When we take responsibility, we partner with God's transforming work instead of waiting for life to change on its own. See, Paul tells Timothy that prayer is the first act of a disciple, a Christian. Before Timothy tries to fix the problems in Ephesus, he's to pray. Prayer turns frustration into faith, and it recenters us in humility instead of pride. At its core, responsibility is a spiritual discipline. It's the ability to lead oneself under God's authority, aligning thoughts, emotions, and actions with his truth. And in the process, growth begins to look less like striving to manage circumstances and more like allowing God to shape how we respond within them. Healthy self-leadership means being honest about what's ours to carry and what's God's to handle. I think many people get stuck because they're trying to carry what they're not supposed to. They're trying to do God's work in their life. True maturity finds the balance, trusting God for the outcome. That's his work. And taking responsibility for obedience. Don't take on a job only God can do. Do the part only you are called to do. The little boy's question still reminds us, why does God let it be so dark? The truth is, darkness becomes the backdrop for the light to be seen. And when we take ownership of our calling to love, to serve, to intercede, to forgive, we become that light. Every time we replace grumbling with prayer, resentment with kindness, or apathy with action, the darkness loses ground. Paul's command isn't just about false teachers, it's about transformation. He calls Timothy and us to lead ourselves well so that our lives, our prayers, our faith become part of what God is doing in the wider world. So as we begin this week, let's take one step of responsibility. Choose one person or leader you find difficult to respect and pray for them daily. Ask God to show you how your own response or attitude can reflect his light. And then lead yourself well, because personal growth always precedes public influence. Through prayer, gratitude, and obedience, we stop waiting for the world to change and start being the very change God wants us to be. May the Lord help us to lead ourselves well this week. Teach us to take responsibility where he's placed us and to pray instead of blame, to act with grace and to bring light into dark spaces. May our hearts and words and prayers make a difference for His glory today, especially at our workplaces and with our family. Click that like button, share so others can find us, subscribe if you want these videos right away. I will see you soon. God bless you.